Happy Monday. Welcome to the show. It is Sandy and Shawn on Mile High Sports. That is Sandy Clough. I'm Shawn Drotar. Thanks for joining us. Of course, over the weekend, a lot to get to. NBA Finals, Stanley Cup Final, the U.S. Open. We'll also be talking about a really, really impressive hockey event with some special guests coming up later in the program. But Sandy, after a sports weekend in which a lot of things happened, and we'll get to the U.S. Open in a bit because there's interesting stories about that as well. But we'll start with the NBA Finals where, I'll admit to a little egg on my face. I did what Sandy has told me never to do in all these years, never call sweeps.
No.
I called sweeps, and guess what that means? Of course, neither of these was a sweep. The Dallas Mavericks, with everything to lose, came back with their best game of the playoffs, a 38-point win over the Boston Celtics, the third biggest margin of victory in NBA Finals history. Boston did not shoot well. I don't think the Dallas was necessarily remarkable, and I don't think it changes the dynamic of the series. We know that teams that have been down 3-0 in 7-game series in the NBA have literally never won a series. So let's skip away from the idea that Dallas could win the series, and let's do what Dallas did. Take it one game at a time. In that game, did you see anything that could be duplicated in tonight's game in Boston?
Maybe. They'll play perhaps better than they did in Boston in games 1 and 2. And I think with a little tweaking, maybe even the starting lineup, I'd play Lively and Green. Jones hasn't done anything in this series. They take Gafford out early in most games anyway. I'd start Lively.
Only 10 minutes for
energy.
Gafford.
Yeah, he brings energy. Bring him off the bench. If you're only going to play him 10 minutes, bring him off the bench and bring Jones off the bench and start Green. Yeah, Green's a better three-point shooter. At least he has been in this series. And I think Dallas established maybe that they have a couple of guys off the bench who can contribute. They shelled Hardaway and Hardy, who had played very well in the conference finals in the win over Minnesota, but didn't show up for the NBA Finals at all. I call that loss an HNL. Human nature loss.
Yes.
Boston gave up the ghost about 5 or 6 minutes into the game. And I think that was always going to happen. If it looked like a blowout in the first quarter, they'd psychologically feel that what's wrong with winning back home in
Right.
game 5.
Right.
And maybe, I mean, they keep teasing us with this and saying Porzingis is day to day. Maybe you can get Porzingis for 10 or 12 minutes tonight. I don't know. That injury is so weird. I don't know why he hasn't been declared out for the series. I strongly suspect he won't play, but they keep talking between games about how he might come back. Even without him, Boston will play better than it did the other night. And in front of 19,000 plus in Boston. I don't think it changed the series. I don't think at any kind of turning point. Yeah, there's some things Dallas can carry over, I suppose, but it was Boston that determined the nature of the game, not Dallas.
I mean,
and Dallas played great. Dallas played
did.
great, but the old saying is that, especially with reserves, they never play as well on the road, especially under pressure. Reserves don't play as well on the road as they do at home.
The starters for Boston, when you look at the shooting, Jason Tatum 4 for 10, Drew Holiday 4 for 10, Jaylen Brown 3 for 12, Derek White 2 for 8. They're not all going to shoot that poorly again as a team. Boston only shot 36.3%. But your point, I think, with Derek Lively is a good one because consistently in this series, he's been excellent. And in that game, in only 22 minutes, 4 for 5 shooting, 11 points, 12 boards, plus 20 in 22 minutes. Lively has really, I'm with you. Were I Jason Kidd, I think I would start Lively, and I think I would build in that regard, trying to see if you can make things a little bit different, give Boston a different look. I agree with you. I I'd be surprised if Porzingis plays. I know they're not ruling him out, and I understand why. But for Dallas, I think you have to play with that same desperation. I don't think they're good enough, and I don't think they'll win the series. But you can build off of a big win. You can get a little bit of confidence, and perhaps that does make a difference because, as you said, the human nature loss. Well, human nature also rides momentum a little bit. And if you're Dallas, you got to win, whether it was because Boston was off or not, you get a little bit of belief there. I'm with you. I would expect Boston to win tonight, but it wouldn't shock me if Dallas maybe had one more in them.
It would shock me if they won.
You feel like,
I do. I can't imagine Boston losing at home. And I know there is always the thought in your back, in the back of your mind that, well, we're up 3-0. Now it's 3-1. We still have some margin for error, but they'll never play the way they did on Friday night in Boston tonight. They'd never play. The fans won't allow them to play that. Even in Game 7 when they lost to Miami last year, Tatum turned an ankle early in the game, but it was not a blowout. Miami deserved to win. Miami was the better team, but that was last year when they and Holiday was awful the other night. He's played well throughout the series. He had one bad game. They had one bad game, and it was in a 3-0 circumstance playing away from home. I don't read much into it. I actually give the Edmonton Oilers a much better chance of staying and perhaps prolonging the series with Florida than I do Dallas winning one game.
And let's go there because obviously on the last game on Saturday, the Oilers came out and they won 8-1. Same desperation, right? They have to win. They come out and they get the win in this game, 8-1. They jump out really early. The Panthers end up pulling Bobrovsky, which I think has less to do with Bobrovsky's performance and more the fact that they kind of punted when Edmonton got up early. They punted the game. No reason to have a guy in Bobrovsky who's been in the net the whole time to put him out there for more minutes. The Oilers punch back 8-1. It's kind of funny, though. I get the star power of McDavid. I understand that. And I agree with you. They have a better chance of winning in Game 5, I think, than Dallas does in Boston for the NBA. But it was if the national media all of a sudden turned around and the idea is, the Panthers have to fix what's wrong. This was a human nature loss for the Panthers, too, right?
I like the idea that in USA Today, in the piece on game number 4 of the Stanley Cup Final, they had a winners and losers column.
Right.
And among the losers, the Panthers overall, this was the worst performance by a team in position to sweep a championship round since the Celtics lost 24 hours ago to the Dallas Mavericks in the NBA Finals.
Third biggest blowout in finals history.
It's a historic blowout. We haven't seen anything like this in 24 hours.
It is really hard to sweep in a Stanley Cup final series. It's really hard to sweep in any Stanley Cup playoff series, but in final series, it's incredibly difficult, especially when you are traveling. Edmonton's at home. They have everything on the line. It's win or go home. And they do have phenomenal scores. McDavid with a goal and 3 assists, +2. I think I still very strongly believe in Florida. It wouldn't surprise me if Florida won Game 5 back at home with now a rested Bobrovsky, which is nice, or at least partially rested. But Edmonton does have enough horsepower to make it interesting. And I think, again, the same things apply. With Doncic and Irving having a good game together, playing well, they come into Boston tonight and think, okay, we did it once. We can do it again. Obviously, McDavid and company and Draisaitl and Hyman and their team has to feel the same way. We did it once. We can do it again.
Yeah, but they didn't do it in Florida.
They did
and
not.
Dallas didn't do it in Boston.
Oilers scored one goal in the first 2 games in Florida. One in total.
And I'm not saying that it will be 5-1, 6-1 the other way tomorrow night with the Panthers regaining the home ice. But I think it's still, even in 8-1, most all those goals were even strength goals, right? They had a 5-on-3 power play goal. Edmonton, I'm talking about.
Right.
The Oilers had a 5-on-3 power play goal. Their power play's been pretty lousy, 5-on-4. I don't think they've scored in this series, have they?
Not 5-on-4.
5-on-4 they haven't. 5-on-3 they did, but 5-on-4 they haven't scored yet. Now, that could be an argument in Edmonton's favor that, hey, you've held that power play basically in check for 4 games. Can you keep doing it even at home? The Panthers have to do one thing: stay out of the box.
Right.
Because when they don't stay out of the box, they're playing with fire, and it could lead to the kind of game where maybe Edmonton doesn't have to play great and Florida beats itself by taking too many penalties. And I think they took a few more the other night than they needed to. But I don't think there are any fundamental differences. Bobrovsky will play much better than he did the other night when they rightly pulled him. There's no point in leaving him in.
He wasn't great, but there was no
hand.
point. Game was out of hand. You realize you're just trying to get out of here healthy, and we'll find out what happens there. There is some really interesting stuff going on in hockey locally this week. We'll talk about that over the next couple segments, but I want to remind you that for the first time back in Denver in 2 years, LFA brings the middleweight championship to the Mile High City at LFA 186. That would be Saturday, June 22nd. This Saturday, champion Azamat Bakov of Russia defends his middleweight belt against top-ranked contender Chauncey Foxworth. Bakov, a Russian wrestler, kind of if you follow UFC, Khabib. He's that kind of fighter. And then Foxworth is on a 6-fight win streak, 28 fights under his belt. That's your main event. And there's a co-main event too, the women's flyweight bout. Russia's Veronika Borisova versus Naira, the Bosnian bombshell rep. Borisova undefeated, a champion in Europe, and rep all of her victories she has won by finish. LFA is the top development league in the sport and has sent more than 300 athletes over to the UFC, and nearly 1/3 of the UFC's current roster are LFA alums. So you can check that out, and it's going to be at a fun place too, at Magnus Arena at the University of Denver. Tickets are available now at denverpioneers.com, but you can win them as well. We're giving away tickets here at Mile High Sports. You can go to Mile High Sports on Instagram for all the latest, and while you're there, check out the interview with Rose Namajunas earlier on Mile High Sports as well, as we get a little bit of MMA up in here. That is not what you want when you're thinking about hockey at this point, but we are delighted to be joined by a guest that needs no introduction for Avalanche fans, but he's going to get one anyway. 805 career points in 14 years with the Colorado Avalanche, the Rocket Richard winner in 2002-2003 with 50 goals, Stanley Cup champion with the Avalanche back in 2000-2001, and that number 3 jersey forever hanging in the rafters. Milan Hejduk, very, very happy to join us here today at Mile High Sports. Thanks for stopping in, because you have a fascinating thing that you're working with Dawg Nation this week.
Absolutely. Well, I'm part of the Dawg Bowl. Obviously, Dawg Nation is doing the Dawg Bowl this year, and it's a huge event. It generates so much money that we can give out to people that need help. I've been part of it for a long time. It's a huge hockey tournament, a lot of participants, a lot of hockey divisions, and I'm part of the Top Dogs, which is a platinum division, the highest division, and we're excited. And we never won it. Actually, there's plenty of good teams, and hopefully we can win it this year.
You still love playing, don't you?
Yes, I do. I mean, it's fun. Obviously, the body is not what it used to be. It's beat up, but I do like it, and it keeps you in shape.
So when you think about continuing hockey and what it brings forward, I know that Dawg Nation has been around for a while. You're one of the formal ambassadors for the program, and it brings it's a 501c3 charity, brings a lot of help to people in the hockey world, whether it's people with disabilities, whether it's first responders. A lot of these people are going to be served by the tournament and by the awareness of the tournament. So not only is it an opportunity to get to play and continue to play, but then you're also bringing the sport of hockey, its accessibility to more people, and bringing the opportunity for showing what hockey community, which is known very well in Colorado and in a lot of places all over the world for being a very tight-knit one.
Absolutely. The hockey community, like you mentioned, it's really a tight community, really good people, and it's great to see that people are helping each other, and there's obviously plenty of people that and families, they need help, and we as a Dawg Nation, we try to provide that. So I'm just really delighted to be part of the program and or the part of the charity, and it's really close to my heart. It's hockey related, and I'm just be glad to be part of it.
Even old rivals tend in retirement to be civil, right, toward one another.
Sure.
And there'll be a lot of celebrities here, NHL celebrities, some college hockey
Yes.
stars will be on hand, people you're very familiar with, and maybe get along with a little better now that all of you aren't playing
Absolutely.
in the NHL anymore.
Absolutely. Like we, obviously tough competitors on the ice, but anytime you meet these people off the ice, they're nice people. I mean,
Even the Red Wings?
Even the Red Wings. Actually, I happened to live a couple of years in Michigan when one of my sons played for the national team development program, and ran into a bunch of Red Wings guys, and Steve Yzerman, for example, and they're also
Well,
nice
he's a great guy.
He's a great guy.
Yeah.
They're nice people. It just in the heat of the battle,
Oh, sure.
sometimes people turn into something that you don't see in them.
To that regard, to going back to that, I've wondered that, because the Avalanche, of course, have had a good run of late, the Stanley Cup a couple of seasons ago. But one of the things, given when the teams moved about, that hasn't kind of find a way to create itself, and it tends to create itself maybe in playoff battles, is that arch rival. And the Avalanche, it seemed maybe for a while, maybe Minnesota might be able to step up, maybe Vegas a little bit might step up, maybe there's the hope that the new Utah franchise might be it, but it's like the Avs haven't quite found that arch villain anymore since Detroit moved away to the East.
Oh, definitely. Obviously, it didn't help that Red Wings, they got moved into the East, and I think the rivalry it takes probably back to back few playoff series.
Oh yeah.
When it turns nasty, obviously, when you battle some team for 6-7 games year after year, and you have to go through them, you create some bad blood, and that's how you create rivalries. And that Avs, I don't know who would be their biggest rivalry. Like you mentioned right now, I don't think it's nothing nowhere near what it used to be with Red Wings. Like you mentioned, maybe the Wild, maybe it's gonna be Utah. Who knows? But they don't have it right now with one team, and these rivalries are awesome, and they're fun to watch. Everyone is into it. Like when we used to have it, the Red Wings, it was just phenomenal, and the whole town got really excited when we played the Red Wings.
Now, 3 of your first 4 years, you played the Red Wings, and the first 2 years, you guys won.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Although neither was in the conference final,
right,
the way it had been the previous 2 times, the two teams that met in the playoffs, but the rivalry was still really keen at that point.
It was huge, and obviously it was a pre-salary cap era, so you really had a handful of teams that could win the Stanley Cup,
right?
And in the West, it was us, Red Wings, Stars, and Blues probably, and in the East you had New Jersey, Toronto. There was just maybe Rangers, but it was not that many really. Right. Now it's obviously you have a more parity in the league, but like before every season, you knew you had to go through Stars, Blues, and Red Wings. Red Wings were really top team, loaded with super talented players. So you knew before every season that you had at some point you have to go through them if you want to win the Stanley Cup, and that made it really special. Both teams were on the top of their games, and
01 was the only year you didn't have. The year you won the cup, you didn't have to go through them that year.
That's right.
Not that the competition wasn't tough. It was.
Who finished them? I think it was LA Kings, maybe.
Yeah.
Kings.
And then you got taken 7 by the Kings, and that was nip and tuck.
Kings finished them in the first round, and we didn't have to do it. But and then it's funny how these rivalry games go. Maybe sometimes the other team is not on the top of their game, but when they play their rival, they
always at their best.
They make sure they elevated their game, and they give you everything they had.
Milan Hejduk, number 3 in the rafters mentioned in Avalanche history. Only 2 men have ever scored more points, Joe Sakic and Nathan MacKinnon. The question I would have for you, Milan, is that you were a captain of the Avalanche, after Joe Sakic to Adam Foote to you. You decided to step away with the idea of giving it to a player who would be a longer-term player in the organization. That player was Gabriel Landeskog. Since they have won the Stanley Cup, he has missed every game since. The idea is to continue to try to get the career back in whatever he can fundamentally do. But the Avs have not named a captain in his absence once. And as a captain of this particular franchise, what did that move mean to you that the players themselves did not want to replace Landeskog, who they knew wouldn't be here all year long?
Well, that speaks really about the character and what kind of person Gabe Gabe is really, truly the leader of the team. Even if he's been out of the lineup for now 2 seasons, he's still there. He's still present. Guys see him in the locker room. He's going through the rehab. The process of getting back and after his knee surgery, and I hope he's going to be back and back in a full form. But like guys see him, and then I'm sure he talks to guys when they need some pep talk and stuff like that. So he's present. He's just not be able to help them on the ice. But he's a phenomenal guy. And even when I was giving him the C at the early his career, like he was well matured behind his.
He was a teenager, right? 19 when he got the captain.
He was
technically
he was the youngest player ever to
Yeah.
be named captain.
Yeah.
Although by the time the season started, Sidney Crosby was
Sidney
actually
Crosby
younger,
was actually,
but at the
younger,
time he was named captain, he was the youngest in history.
So I was at the end of my career. I had I think it was like last season. I had 8 games left for 1,000 games, and I just want to be back for that. But like my role wasn't as what it used to be, and we talked about it with the general manager at that time, and if I should give it to someone, and we decided to give it to Gabe, and it was definitely a great choice, and he was a phenomenal leader. Obviously, they won the cup in 2022, and hopefully he will be back next season and in full form, and he's going to help the team to win, to lead to another cup.
You mentioned 1,000 games, 1,020 games, 805 points. Are the games almost more meaningful to you than the number of points you scored?
Well, when you
1,000's a big number, and you got past it.
Yeah, when you get that close, I remember my not the last season, the one before. So I was eight games away from 1,000 games. It was 992. And then we had a lock. I think there was a lockout for half of the season.
That was your last season.
That was my season. It was half of the season. So I was kind of waiting for that. But, I want to. If you get that close, I mean, obviously, if you're sitting on 900 games and you really you don't have the game anymore, really, or you're not on the top of your game for sure, I might retire. But because you're that close, you want to get it done. It's a special number. It's not that many guys really actually play 1,000 games in the league. It's I mean, there are some, but it's not that many really.
No.
Yeah.
And of course, you shouldn't ignore the 112 you played in the playoffs.
No,
as well. A big part of it, including
that counts.
Yeah, that Stanley Cup year with the 16 assists led the entire NHL playoff run.
01, right?
76 points in your career in the playoffs too. We hear about it a lot in hockey, and the difference between a Stanley Cup playoff game and a regular season game, to the point where when you're talking about younger teams, it has experience. I talked to a player once that said that every period you play in a Stanley Cup playoff game for a young player is about the same experience you'd get in a month of regular season play. Why is that? What is so compressed and intense about it that makes it such a unpredictable tournament?
Well, like you mentioned, everything is so elevated, so magnified. So any little mistakes are magnified, and usually the other teams capitalize on any mistakes. So I think that's so important for young teams to even if they get in the playoffs and get out in the first round because they don't have that team early in their, let's say, in their careers. It's great to be in that and feel what an experience what with older guys and see how they react to different things. I think more than in regular season, you have the swings of the momentum, each game, each period, each series, huge, like way more different and magnified than regular season swings in momentum. Like you can see that it's shifting inside each period. The crowds get into it. You're doing more interviews and everything is magnified, and then it's just super cool and be part of it because the games mean so much. You work the 82 season regular season to put yourself in a spot that you can compete for a Stanley Cup and basically and try to secure the home ice for example. And when we won the 2001, we won the President's Trophy.
Yeah.
So we get the home ice. Every series we started at home, and Game 7s, you get it.
Yes, that's the big one, right?
I think it's
to have Game 7 at home.
It's a big deal for Game 7. To have the Game 7 at home, I think it just means a little bit more to have it at home That's you battle a whole season, a regular season for that, and actually it served us well in 2001.
I wanted to ask you this question. I don't know if I've ever asked it to you before, but you had the 01 season playing with Sakic and Tanguay, and you had 41 goals. And then 2 years later, you're the best line in the league, certainly during the second half of the season, playing with Peter Forsberg and Alex Tanguay. Again, you scored 50 goals, led the league in goals that year, had plus 52, plus minus, led the league in that. What were the differences between playing with Joe Sakic as your center and Peter Forsberg as your center?
Well, first of all, I got to mention that you can't go wrong with either of them.
Of course not.
Both phenomenal players, Hall of Famers, and really, I was blessed to play with both of them. They're a little bit different. Joe, playing with Joe was more like a give and go guy.
Give and go, yeah.
Yes, with tons of speed. You knew you're gonna get the puck back. Peter was like he liked the puck. He took it through neutral zone into the offensive zone, and you had to get open in an offensive zone. It was just two different different players. Peter, his vision was phenomenal. Joe was more goal scorer. Joe scored tons of goals in his career, a bunch of overtime goals, right? Phenomenal shot. Actually, like skate from full strides, didn't really telegraph the shot and beat a lot of goalies, just surprised them how quick the shot came from full speed, which in hockey is very hard to do. And Peter's vision was just phenomenal. So a little bit two different players, but I was delighted to play with either of them, really. Yeah.
Well, now you've been playing in Dawg Bowl 14 over at the Edge Ice Arena. That's roughly 470 in Ken Carroll out in Littleton. As you pointed out, you haven't won this one yet. You and your team have not won this one yet. So
it's a little edge.
Yeah, a little bit. Too. So folks who want to go out there and check out Dawg Bowl 14, you should go to dawgnation.org, DAWG nation.org. 55 teams, over 1,000 players, a lot of different tournaments. Folks like Milan Hejduk playing in that, and you do not get an opportunity to see players of that caliber play at any level. So make sure you check it out, enjoy the event, and hopefully you have a chance to see number 23 here. Milan Hejduk, thank you so much for joining us. You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Milan. Good to see you.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll be back in just a moment on My Life Sports.
And, of course, we all like to make plans, short-term plans, long-term plans, but most of those plans we make are rather pleasant. We don't plan for the unexpected. We certainly don't plan for the catastrophic, but it can happen. You can be in a car accident, whether it's your fault or not. You can be injured, maybe even seriously. But if you've been involved in an accident, the first thing you want is the best attorney or the best attorneys possible working for you. You need the very best, and you have them in Zahner Harden Law. Kurt Zahner and Mark Harden are the types of lawyers you want handling your case. They're two of the most elite personal injury lawyers in Colorado and throughout the country. They've won nearly every award, from Trial Lawyer of the Year to Super Lawyers, top 100 national trial lawyers. They've appeared in the Denver Post, on local news outlets, and even on Good Morning America. These guys handle the most important cases cases. They do great work. They make our community a safer place to live with multi-million-dollar verdicts and the respect of every insurance company. You're lucky to have these guys in our backyard right here in the greater Denver metro area. So if you've been involved in an auto accident, reach out to Zaner Harden today at yourstorywill-be-told.com. That's yourstorywill-be-told.com.
Well, you just heard us talk to Milan Hejduk about Dawg Bowl 14. Well, we have with us now the dog father himself, Martin Richardson, the man who started this more than 20 years ago. Thank you for joining us. But it might surprise people when you talk about dog hockey that you are a Hall of Famer at Metro for the Roadrunners in soccer, or more accurately, I guess I should say, football.
Football.
Correct. That is true. Thank you.
Yeah. So you end up going from soccer to hockey then 20 years ago. Obviously, you played both of them. What was the genesis behind starting Dawg Nation, and what has it become in the 20 years since?
Yeah, so it started, it was just a beer league hockey team. And for quite a while, it was just, that's all we were. And in 2009, 15 guys on the team, unbelievably, in a 1 week period, not one, not two, but three of those players were all diagnosed with cancer. And each time we'd pass my hat around the room, figuratively and actually, and we'd raise a little bit of money and go see Danny or Dave or Andy in the hospital. And it wasn't that we gave them $200. It was that they had someone that cared for them. Unbelievably, that same year in 2009, a fourth guy on our team ended up getting sick, but it wasn't cancer. It was an autoimmune disease. And his name was Jack Kelly, and that took his life. And when that happened, we decided to help out other families, and we figured we can't be the only ones. And it's really how it started. And unbelievably, this week, and when we do the checks throughout the weekend, we're going to be over $5 million to families in need.
The event this weekend starts actually on Wednesday. Am I correct? Yeah. June 19th through the 23rd, Edge Ice Arena. And basically the theme is honoring first responders. But there is a lot more, and it strikes me that what you're doing starting on Wednesday and going all the way through Saturday is a combination of some of the initiatives that you've brought to bear in the history of Dawg Nation, and it all comes together in a 4-day period.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. We're going to kick things off with special hockey, which is kind of a Special Olympics type thing. There's actually several organizations throughout the Denver area, and we're going to have the Wizards and Eagles playing on to kick it off. And then we have 3 versions or levels of sled hockey throughout the weekend, including several members of the U.S. national team playing on Saturday, and even a member of the Japanese national team. So it's kind of cool. And then even then we're going to do a blind hockey, and I didn't catch all of your chat with Milan there, but it's two blind hockey teams, one called the Visionaries, the other one called the Dented Pucks, and each team's going to have 2 celebrities on, and Milan and I are going to play blind hockey, but we're going to
you're wearing goggles, right?
Wearing goggles that create the same visual imparities that the players on the ice have. So Milan's a little nervous about doing this. So it's like he said to me, "I'm not going to go head first into the boards." I said, "Only if you don't know how to skate."
Well,
I'm pretty sure you do.
Yeah,
So
that's right. And he has magical hands. And those aren't disturbed.
Too. So, but yeah, we have that. And then throughout the weekend, each year we choose a theme, and this year was a first responder theme. And along those lines, our larger recipients during this weekend will be our local heroes.
It's obviously a really big event. We've talked about there's 55 teams involved in this. It starts on Wednesday because it needs to go through the whole weekend. Members of the USA Paralympic sled team, as you pointed out, the blind team. There are also ways that you can participate. The best part about it, by the way, is it's free. Yeah. You just show up, you just watch it, you watch the games, you enjoy, you learn more about it, you learn more about the organization. There will be a silent auction and other ways for you to contribute. But for people who just want to come out and see what it's available and see what it is, you have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you have the whole weekend to just go check out some hockey in the middle of the summer.
Yeah, you do. And it really ramps up on Friday in the evening, early evening. Our Top Dogs team, which Milan has chosen to be a coach this year. He and Derek Armstrong will coach that, but that has 5 current DU pioneers on it. Has 2 Harvard kids who happen to have the last name Hejduk. And
funny how that works.
Yeah, funny how that works. And a former DU guy who you guys are going to know, Evan Cowley's going to backstop for us.
Sure.
And Matty Davis is playing on one of the other teams. So
you're kidding.
No, so that's going to be kind of fun.
So come out and see a whole bunch of national
great.
champions.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we just added this defenseman last week that is going to be pretty good for a beer league hockey team. His name's Sam Girard. So that should be
he's got some wheels.
Yeah.
We know that. I don't know who's going to try to mark that fella,
Yeah.
but I mean, you'll have NHL stars, you'll have NCAA stars, and of course in Colorado you have recent Cup champs.
Yeah.
Girard, you talked about
Yeah.
the DU pioneers, and then all of this goes to a terrific cause. But now you started this in 2003, and there have to be challenges in keeping this going over and over and over again, and trying to keep it so now it builds to the size of where you're taking the majority of a week.
Yeah.
What were the big hurdles from what
Yeah.
you started into turning it into something that now has this kind of footprint, not only in Colorado,
Mhm.
but also in Missouri?
So yeah, it actually was just a beer league team up until 2011. We started on 1-1-1-1, and started with our goalie and defenseman and right wing, and we all threw $100 in the middle of the table, and they looked at me. I'm a CPA by trade, and said, figure out how to make a 501c3. And we didn't really think it would ever be more than a couple $1,000 a year, and we all had regular jobs and stuff, so we didn't think it would be much more than that. But so it kind of took a life of its own. And some of the big things that happened very early on, he passed away fairly recently with Peter McNabb, but we talked a lot, and we never remembered even how we met. But he was a really big part, because he would talk about us on the Avs broadcasts a lot,
Right.
And then he'd have me on, and then when Mosier came in, same thing happened there, and we had it with George Gwozdecki pretty early on, and he passed the baton to Monty. And David Carl last week sent me a picture, and he goes, "Do you remember when this was taken?" I said, "No." He said, "That is the day you met me, and I hadn't even coached a DU game yet." And Jim Montgomery had set that up Jim I give huge amount of credit for keeping that momentum going
absolutely
through DU, and said, "You got to be part of this organization," and he is now. And so it's really, Shawn, a lot of that has just been, we're blessed. I mean, it's really cool to hang out with celebrities and have them here, but honestly, it's a totally different thing for me. Joe Sakic and Debbie, they want to know how they can help. And same with Jared Bednar and Susan. And for me, it's, and you've seen how David Carl is with us too. It's like
wonderful.
We wouldn't be able to do it without all these guys. And it created a whole life of its own.
And we've seen how this draws so many parts of the community together.
Yeah.
And your organization has really become not only a wonderful local, regional enterprise, but nationally and even internationally. The work you've done with the Humboldt families and the kids, the survivors, has been awe-inspiring. And that is an ongoing effort year after year after year.
Yeah, that was kind of just a fluke how that happened. I was working with sled hockey. I just started doing the sled thing. Went to the sled national championships. The week before that, the Humboldt accident had happened. And so there was a lot of Humboldt. It was across, I mean, not just hockey, it was across everywhere you saw it. And there was a lot of stuff there. And while I was there, a former Denver cutthroat of all people was up in Calgary, and he coached one of the Humboldt kids. Like, that's how that happened. And that kid had become paralyzed, and in his hospital bed, his name's Ryan Straczynski. He said, "My hockey career is not over. I'm going to become a sled player." And I happened to be at a sled event, and that guy from the Cutthroats called me and said, "You guys got to connect." And I didn't think it'd go anywhere from that. Wrote him, sent him a personal letter with a dog hat, and the U.S. national players, which were at that tournament, had just won the gold medal. One of them took his stick that he used in the gold medal game, and all the guys signed it, and I mailed it in a box up there. And the rest is history from that one.
Now, when you take a look at the dognation.org website, make sure you check it out. You can see all the things they're putting together, all the schedules for Dog Bowl this week too. But then make sure you look at the Join Us, because even if you haven't had a chance to come out this week and you can't find a way to see it, although there are a lot of amazing things to see, you can still help. And there are levels that you can contribute, and you can even contribute on a monthly level on a tax deductible basis for as low as $5 a month to go ahead and help. And help people get their lives back together, help people get healthier, help people build that community. And we brought it up with Milan a little bit as well, but the hockey community in Colorado, you just talked about it, the Avalanche or DU or the folks at the Edge out in Littleton. Yeah. This is a small community in which an awful lot of people know each other. And even the people who don't know each other, they often know a lot of the same people. And that's part of what makes this organization, but also elevates the Colorado hockey community in a way that I don't think people necessarily understand until they experience it.
No, I would agree with you. And it is a pretty small community. I coached kids soccer for a lot of years, and we would play a team, and I might not see that team again for 3 years. In hockey, you see the same families over and over and over again. And if it might be, I mean, obviously there's a lot of intensity to the sport and different things like that, but in the end, nobody wants ill will on anyone. And they do rally over and over and over again.
And you got food trucks, barbecue, taco night.
Yeah.
There's a movie night on Friday.
Movie night Friday.
Movie night. Yeah, movie night. It's called The Late Game. It's a local guy named Jeffrey Zucker, who, interesting tie there. His family owned the Carolina Stingrays when Jared Bednar was coaching them.
Really?
Yeah, and Jeffrey moved out to Colorado, and Jared said, "There's this guy you got to meet."
Yeah.
I met him. And then he made his first movie, and it's called The Late Game, and it's about beer league hockey. And we're going to show that live outside on Friday night.
Make sure you check it out. Dognation.org, DAWG, dognation.org is the website. All sorts of ways you can get involved, even if you're not coming out to Dog Bowl 14. But you have such an opportunity to see an awful lot of amazing things. There's a police versus the firefighters game. Yeah. There's obviously, we talked about the Paralympian teams. We've talked about the vision impaired teams. Of course, Milan Hejduk's going to be out there. You mentioned Maddie Davis. So many tremendous athletes will be out there. It's going to be a tremendous amount of fun. Marty Richardson, thank you for taking some time and getting this going, and rest up, because it sounds like you got a very busy week coming.
It's going to be a busy week, and we always get through it, but it's going to be fun.
Thanks, Marty.
All right, thanks, Marty. Dognation.org is the website. Go check it out, whether you're going to attend or not, and see the ways you can help as hockey continues to elevate in the Colorado community. Marty Richardson, the founder and head of dognation.org, joining us today. Thanks so much. The world of sports betting right now obviously has been a little overwhelming in the last 4 years since it's been made legal. You've heard the ads, you've seen the ads, you've been overwhelmed by the ads, and heck, you can probably, recite some of them in your sleep. So we're going to add a little bit to the pile, but this one's going to be worth it. Did you know that Mile High Sports has gathered all of the best sign-up bonuses and offers and put them on one page on our website? Well, we did that to make it easy for folks who are interested in the world of online betting to find the best options. So we researched all of it and brought it together in a way that makes it simple to know what's available, whether that's bonus bets, second chance bets, deposit matches. Everything is in one place, so you can go through all the books and you can find out what the best deal is for you, the best way for you to jump into the online sports betting world. So here's how you do it. You go to milehighsports.com today, or you download our free app on all of your smartphones, an easy way to catch this show and all the other things we do here at Mile High Sports. Then you click on Colorado Sports Betting, and they'll be all there, arrayed for you, the latest and greatest opportunities from all of the books for a way to you jump in and enjoy the fun in the way you want to do it. It's just that simple. Think of it as your bonus from your friends at Mile High Sports. A terrific opportunity to talk hockey. Here we are in June, and it is a terrific chance, Sandy. We just heard from Milan Hejduk. We just heard from Marty Richardson about the tremendous event going on in Dog Bowl 14. And obviously that's going to be very special. But the Avalanche also, for Avs fans looking at what's next, the draft is next week. And they're going to be holding that at the Sphere in Vegas. At the tail end of next week, the draft is upon us for the Colorado Avalanche. They are now scheduled to pick 24th, but at the 24th spot, you don't get an immediate NHL player. The Avs obviously have traded a lot of those picks over the last couple of years to make this Stanley Cup run and keep that window open. Would you be doing it again, or is this actually the time the Avs maybe need to start stockpiling a little talent for an eventual reload?
I would not trade any more picks. not the next few weeks anyway. Maybe you look to free agency, but I think the accent this year is going to be on retaining their own people.
Yeah.
And yes, retaining their own draft picks.
Well, the draft selections, there are some impactful players that the Avs can use to rebuild. One of the nice things is we look at their needs. It does seem you can always use more goaltending in your system. I get that. But at least the Avalanche seem to have the goaltending setup between Georgiev and Ananen. They seem to have a pretty good pair that is not only good in the short term, but seems to be in the relatively long term, while this championship window with Makar and McKinnon and Rantanen leaves it open. So that's a position the Avs have struggled to fill. Seems like they now have their top two goaltenders. They need more wing scoring for sure. We know about the situations with Landeskog and Nichushkin, but when you look at the needs overall and you look at who they're likely to retain, maybe Shawn Walker's one of those guys that monetarily you're not going to get to. What's the priority for you when you look at the Avs? Say they have to have this if they're going to be legitimate Stanley Cup contenders next season.
Well, I think they need more depth. They need forwards for the third and fourth lines. Now, Logan O'Connor coming back next year who is still ascending at the time of his injury, right? You have, I think, possibly the opportunity to keep the fourth line together, which was especially effective in the Winnipeg
with Trennan and Duhaime. Yeah,
exactly right. And to keep those guys, but bolster the third line, and maybe you're able to get an even more experienced Ross Colton centering that line. Remember, he wasn't a center before the Avalanche put him there this year. He had been a winger in Tampa, and of course played on a championship team there, scored a key goal, and they're winning the Stanley Cup along the way. And one of the 2 years they won it in succession. And then you have Miles Wood, who really came on toward the end of the year and on into the playoffs. And you get O'Connor back, and those three had it going for about 2 or 3 weeks in January. They were dubbed the Roaring 20s line because of the numbers on you got number 20 in Colt, number 28 in Wood, number 25 in Logan O'Connor. We didn't talk very much about O'Connor's absence.
No,
once he went out of the lineup, even though he'd been playing hurt for months, and it was a pretty big deal, we didn't talk about it very much.
Great year,
and he was having a terrific year. At 13 goals, had some shorthanded goals early in the season, but 13 goals, had an outside chance maybe to get somewhere between 15 and 20 goals for the year. You'll take that production anytime from a third line wing. Heck, sometimes on a second line, you take 15 to 20 goals. Now, I don't know that Logan O'Connor will come back next year and score 15 to 20 goals, but his ability as a penalty killer, he can responsibly play 15, 16 minutes a game. He's not a guy you have to worry about being streaky with his effort varying from game to game. So I think they need more of that. He will give them some of it. Having Trennan, hopefully for an entire season, will help. Duhaime is an edgy kind of player. Wood, I think, toned down on some of the silly penalties he really had to be taken in New Jersey.
The speed was there. The physicality was there. Some of the opportunistic play was there, but the penalties.
But that's what Jared Bednar brings. He takes guys who maybe he did it with Kadri, and I think this year a little bit with Miles Wood too. Wood's not as good a player as Kadri, but he calmed them down. And Kadri was famous for taking silly penalties and sometimes getting suspended for them in the Stanley Cup playoffs. He came here and had one problem, 1 year. Bednar stuck with him, and that was the year prior to their winning the Stanley Cup in 2022.
A lot of unrestricted free agents. We talked about Shawn Walker. I think you and I agree he's probably not coming back because he had the largest salary already. Probably can't afford him. When you look at the also unrestricted free agents, Trennan, as we've mentioned, Duhaime, are both unrestricted. Jack Johnson, who is even at 37, been
Says he wants to
extremely
play.
reliable on that final pairing, and maybe you're going to need to pair him with a youngster like Sam Malinsky. So maybe that's not a bad fit to bring Jack Johnson back. We know that Zach Parise is retiring. Jonathan Duran, of course, maybe the most important free agent to take care of. Andrew Cogliano's deciding whether he can play, and even Caleb Jones and Joel Kiviranta are unrestricted free agents. So there are a lot of moving pieces for the Avs, and they probably can't bring them all back. And that doesn't even talk about Casey Middlestat, who is a restricted free agent. He will be back, but he's going to get a raise. So the Avs about $9.3 million under the cap. Bringing all of these guys back is going to be tough.
But that's accounting for the salaries that right now we don't know about for the coming year with Nichushkin and Landeskog. And there's no assurance that either will play next year.
Right. And that complicates things for the Avs. One of the players that I think we'll need to talk about in the offseason is Nikolai Kovalenko, who made his NHL debut in the playoffs and briefly, but did not look as if
didn't look out of place.
It didn't look like the view was too big for him on the ice. Looked like he was there. There's a right winger with a scoring touch. I think the Avs are probably looking at Kovalenko and thinking, we need to get something out of this guy next year. He needs to be a part of what we're doing, probably from the get-go, because they need wingers, they need scorers, and he's 25 years old. So he's as ready as he's probably going to get. I think that one of the things that we look at when we're trying to look at how this team will build itself out is people are overlooking that I think Kovalenko is going to be on the right wing for one of these bottom three lines. I don't know which one it's going to be.
I don't think it'll be the second.
But I think he is going to be part of that. I look at the third, and I even think of if he's healthy, as you pointed out, if they have to, maybe that's Logan O'Connor, who I do think will get to 15 goals next year. But Kovalenko, I think, is a part of that puzzle. And when you look at this team's ability to bring young players up, there's good news and bad news. Bad news is there's not a lot of it. The good news is that Kovalenko and Malinsky, to my eyes at least, look ready.
And if you brought Jones back, Jones played quite a bit this year.
And and he's your seventh defenseman, or maybe Malinsky is. That's fine. Either one of those guys steps in. So at least goaltending, defense appears to be in pretty good shape. You don't need to have a lot of outside solutions for that. So that part is good, because if you're looking at what's hardest to get in free agency, it goes goalies, top-tier defensemen, and then forwards. So at least what the Avs are hunting for, or even trying to retain in the Trennans and the Duhaimes of the world, there might not be as much competition for their services.
That's true. But it all hinges on how they navigate the Landeskog injury and the Nichushkin suspension. And the Nichushkin suspension is even more out of their hands than Landeskog's. The doctors will determine that
he's off the cap until he is until or unless he is reinstated.
But this is Nichushkin's deal now, being off the cap because of that suspension, and the league will determine that.
And
the joint program run by the NHL and NHLPA, the Player Assistance Program, Nichushkin's in stage 3, and I think people have the wrong idea that at least 6 months is the same thing as up to 6 months. It's not.
No,
he could be reinstated on November 15th. The chances of his being reinstated around that time, which would only be about 6 weeks into the season, to me are slim and none. The league does not care for players who have violated not just one, but the first 2 stages of their program.
I think
I don't think the union's crazy about it either, because there haven't been that many players in stage 3. There are 2 that we know of in Nichushkin and Theo Fleury, but that was way back in the day when the program first started, and it was in its beginning stages, and Theo's problems maybe were a little more obvious and public, and he talked about them. That is the polar opposite of the Nichushkin situation, in which nobody has really talked except players who have either said, hey, our first and only concern is his well-being, or have expressed frustration at being let down
Jack
for 2
Johnson,
years in
first
a
and
row
foremost.
during the playoffs. And Jack Johnson, I think it is safe to say, was speaking for several players / people within the Avalanche organization. And yet it isn't up to his teammates or the Avs as to when or if he gets reinstated. You would assume at some point he would apply for reinstatement, having cleared all the protocols. And the Avalanche at that point would have to start paying him, whether they choose to play him, whether they try to trade him, whether they can trade him. That's to be determined.
But his full number hits the cap the day he's reinstated. And if the Avs are over it at that point, they will have to make moves.
Yeah,
to get on.
True.
It is complicated. The whole
but
situation is complicated.
They can talk about
They can
trades.
talk about buyouts. They can
talk about buyouts.
There are things you can do.
Even right now they can.
Yeah. So who knows with that? But it will make this offseason very, very challenging because, you have in Landeskog and Nichushkin just about 15 plus million of your cap that at the moment isn't being applied, but could be applied in Landeskog's case at any conceivable time, and in Nichushkin's case at any time post-November, neither of which the Avs can actually plan for. So that's really tricky. And it's unfortunate given the reality that they're in, because they are very close to being Stanley Cup contenders again, and maybe would have been had Nichushkin not been suspended. I think you're right. I don't think it's going to be 6 months because the optics of it from the union and the league, and he had this earlier in the year.
Both look bad.
And then it came back again. We're like, we're not letting him back until we know this will not happen again.
This is a period of roughly a year, maybe 13 months, where he went through stage 1 and stage 2, and now is into stage 3.
Right.
I can't remember a
separate
single
times
incident.
Had to step away from his team.
During the playoffs, in back-to-back years, a guy steps away and on into the program. And now we find out, of course, and now we know that last spring led him into stage 1, which was not made public at the time. Not that it had to be.
Right.
Samuel Girard chose to speak about entering stage 1. He didn't have to, and the team wouldn't have said anything had he not issued a statement. What was misleading was Nichushkin in January issuing a statement that strongly implied that he was going into stage 1 when in fact he was going into stage 2. And I thought, again, confidentiality may be his to decide whether he wants it to remain confidential or not. But I thought it was disingenuous, certainly misleading for Nichushkin not to make mention of the fact that, along with the other things included in a statement that he wanted to get well once and for all, that this was stage 2 and not stage 1.
Yeah, it's.
I thought that made his teammates look bad. His teammates welcomed him back, quote unquote, with open arms. That's what Nathan McKinnon said last year, who was, in Gabriel Landeskog's absence, effectively the team leader. When the team leader said, "We welcome you back with open arms," you're not thinking this is a guy coming out of stage 1. You're thinking this is a guy who had a problem. We don't know exactly what it was. Maybe we don't need to know, but it turns out that the players went out and staked out a position one time after he had let them down once. And, the old saying, fool me once,
right.
Shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And a lot of the Avalanche players, I think, are through with the idea of playing again with Valeri Nichushkin.
One way or the other, it's not in any of the Avalanche's hands now. It's in Nichushkin's hands and the hands of the league and the NHLPA's program. We'll find out more as that goes along. Obviously, we know it will be until at least November, but the Avalanche do have in control their draft next Friday and Saturday. The draft will be held at Sphere in Las Vegas, the first ever event televised live from there. That should be fascinating. The Avs scheduled to pick 24th. We'll take a peek more of that as we get closer to the draft, but want to remind you that in just under a month, it's getting close, so you want to start getting your tickets. The 4th annual Colorado Whiskey Fest is coming to the Douglas County Fairgrounds on Saturday, July 13th. Food, wine, beer, and spirits vendors will be on site, including more than 50 different whiskey vendors, hence, Whiskey Fest. So if you're a whiskey fan, you're going to have an opportunity to sample all sorts of things. The festival takes place from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Live music from the Kevin Austin Band and Mojo Filter. Tickets are already available online, but if you use the promo code MHS, for Mile High Sports, you'll save $15 right off the top. It's the Colorado Whiskey Fest presented by the Whiskey Cartel. If you're 21 and up, use the promo code MHS to get $15 off your tickets. Get them today at whiskeyfestcolorado.com. That's the 4th annual Colorado Whiskey Fest, Douglas County Fairgrounds, July 13th. The Colorado Rockies, well, they're out of it now, and they'll be out of it on July 13th, but they are in the midst of the longest homestand of the year. They dropped 2 of the first 3 to Pittsburgh. Kind of a weird 3-game series. They lose the first game 5-2. They win the second game 16-4, and then they lose 8-2. So in other words, they win the one game 16-4. They lose the other 2 by an aggregate 13-4. So I don't know what to make of that, except for the fact that when you're a bad baseball team, you're also an inconsistent one.
Well, the bats were booming on Saturday night, and they went virtually silent yesterday. I know they had 9 hits, but they were, for the most part, little hits.
Scattered, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Well scattered. They did come up with single-run innings, I believe, in the 7th and the 9th, but the game was out of hand long before then. And you lose 2 out of 3 to Pittsburgh, and again, it continues the Rockies' pattern of playing more inconsistently and frankly, playing an inferior brand of baseball against losing teams. As opposed to winning teams. Now, they got the Dodgers for 4 tonight, and the Dodgers just lost Mookie Betts over the weekend to a broken left hand, which will keep him out for not just weeks, but months, I imagine. The thinking is he'll probably come back this year, but he's a shortstop with a broken left hand. And you saw the pitch. It was a 98, 99 mile hour pitch that hit him.
There's a lot of little bones in your hand. Yes, that doesn't heal fast.
That does not heal quickly, and obviously you can't bandage it up. It's his left hand, and no matter which hand it is, you can't play.
I mean, he's out.
No, he's out. He's out for a few months. Now they're still a hell of a team.
Yeah.
It's still a formidable batting order.
Yeah.
But their form of late has not been great. Since the first week in May, they've been pretty much a 500 club. They do have a winning record. It's a 4-game series. And even if you're a vastly superior team, it's tough to take 3 out of 4 and even harder to take all 4 games in a 4-game series. And you got Quantrill on the bump tonight for the Rockies. He's been their best pitcher for a month and a half.
Yeah. Austin Gomber will go in the second game against Walker Buehler tonight as James Paxton on the hill for the Dodgers. Feltner, who took the loss in the opening game against Pittsburgh, will be back for the third game. And then Ty Block, who has pitched pretty well, was the winner in the 16-4 game. So the Rockies are getting, quite frankly, surprisingly decent starting pitching from a bunch of guys who are not supposed to be pitching in the slots in which they're pitching right now. No Germán Marquez, no Kyle Freeland, no Antonio Senzatella. Quantrill and Gomber were supposed to be 3, 4, or 5 guys, and they're having to carry the load. And Gomber has had a couple bad outings, but Quantrill in particular has been quite consistent. And Block, who basically got promoted to being starter because there's nobody left to start, has done a pretty respectable job there as well. As lackadaisical, and I know that's kind of it's a word that's loaded. As lackadaisical as the Rockies were playing in April. As lackadaisical as I believe Bud Black was managing the team in April, this has actually been the fact that in their last 35 games, they're 17-18 is kind of an impressive turnaround to me, because I look at this team, and if the Rockies had, say, started their first 35 games 17-18, we'd be looking at it going, whoa, what is Bud Black doing with these guys? This is pretty remarkable. It's getting lost in the shuffle because the team is well underwater. But there is something going on here that's positive, and you do kind of have a bunch of scrappers who are maybe starting to believe. Are they good enough to win consistently? No, we saw it against Pittsburgh. But there are moments, and some of the young talent is bubbling up, and it is a little bit interesting. I think if they were to split this series with the Dodgers, I think you'd feel pretty good about it.
They're obviously sellers, though, you would think, of the trade deadline, if they're anything.
And Quantrill should probably be one.
We talked about them. They're the icons of inaction when it comes to the trade deadline, although last year they made several minor deals. But again, the infuriating aspect continues to be, apart from the three division leaders in the National League who are all running away with their respective divisions. The Dodgers are up 8 over San Diego. Milwaukee's up on St. Louis by 6.5, and Atlanta trails Philadelphia in the East by 8 games. Take those three teams out of it.
But those are the only 3 teams in the entire National League. There's only 4 teams in the entire NL. 4. Phillies, Brewers, with winning records, and the Braves. Nobody else. And only one team's at 500. That's the Cards at 35 and 35. In the NL West, every team of the Dodgers is underwater. In the Central, you have the Brewers and the Cards at 35 and 35, and everyone's underwater.
You've got 12 other teams, though, apart from those 3, and 10 of the 12 are within a game and a half of a wild card spot.
Because everyone's underwater.
Because only Atlanta, among the wild card teams as of this moment, has a winning record.
Yeah.
St. Louis at 500, and all the others have losing records. San Diego has the 3rd playoff spot, but the Padres are tied with the Nationals for that final wild card spot. Arizona a half game out. San Francisco a half game out. Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, 1 game out. Cubs and Mets a game and a half out. The Mets have won 5 in a row, and all of a sudden, even at 33 and 37, the Mets are a game and a half out of the playoffs. And they're hitting their stride, it seems, offensively right now. The Rockies and the Marlins are the only teams out of it. And over in the American League, you've got, I think, at least half a dozen teams that are basically out of it. And even Boston, which is right behind Baltimore, Kansas City, and Minnesota, right behind Minnesota.
Right.
But Minnesota's 40 and 32, and Boston's 3 games out of a wild card spot. There's nobody except for the Rockies and Miami that's far back. That's as far back as the Red Sox are over in the American League. And I'll tell you what, maybe Alex Cora doesn't want to manage next year for anybody.
Yeah.
But if he does, the Rockies ought to do what the Rockies never, ever have done. And that's go out and do what the Cubs did last year to the Milwaukee Brewers. When the Brewers manager, Craig Counsell, former Rocky, was a free agent. And the Cubs went out and said, he's going to be our manager, and we're going to pay him accordingly. And there was no way that Milwaukee could keep him. That's what the Rockies ought to do with respect to Alex Cora. Make him the highest paid manager in baseball and make him the manager for 2025. Then we can get excited, because the job he's doing with the Red Sox this year, who have tons of young players who are very athletic, and their young players are probably more athletic than the Rockies' young players, but the Rockies have promising young players too. It would be the perfect team for an Alex Cora to manage, and I think the Rockies could challenge for a wild card spot next year if Alex Cora is their manager. If it's Bud Black or anybody else, they'll be 10 games out of a wild card spot and a zillion games out of first place, 18 games out or whatever they are right now. That'll happen again next year and the year after, and the year after, and the year after, from here to eternity.
It basically boils down to, at a certain point, How much do you value, and I definitely use the air quotes there for those watching on YouTube, your culture, right? Which has certainly been Bud Black for a long time. And there's nothing wrong with Bud Black as manager, but I get your point. Or how much do you really want to be taken seriously as a franchise? Because the Rockies at this point now, we know, I mean, we've seen the quotes, players have anonymously said it's like going to the Stone Age.
Yes.
There have been other GMs that have talked on the record, but obviously with some anonymity, that have said that dealing with the Rockies is the most confusing thing in the world because
you don't know, there's nobody in charge.
There's nobody in charge, and they don't even seem to know what they want.
No.
And that's the perception around the league. It is, to your credit, you have Ezekiel Tovar, you have Ryan McMahon, you have Brendan Rodgers, you have Adile Amador, who's still coming. You have Zach Veen, you have Drew Romo, you have Brent Doyle, you have Nolan Jones. There's talent here, but at a certain point, you're going to have to fully commit to deciding, are we going to win? Or are we just trying to be entertaining enough to fill up the party deck? The Rockies this year, and I'm really not picking, but to get an idea of what has happened. A couple of weeks ago, the Rockies had standing room. You can have the standing room only tickets on the party deck, right? The Rockies sent out an offer. I mean, I got the email that if you spend $39 a month for the rest of the year, you get an SRO ticket to the party deck for any home game you want.
Any home game.
Any home game.
That includes
any home game.
Games.
Dodgers.
Interleague games
anything.
That might be attractive.
$39 a month, which was, that's used to be a ticket, right? $39 a month. You can go to as many as you want, SRO in the party deck. If that doesn't show you, Sandy, that your point, that the attendance, it's always going to trail the performance. And even though there are things to be excited about at 20th and Blake, I think fans, for the most part, have given up on the Rockies as being a solvent franchise when it comes to being a contender.
But you know what? And I know they play in a bigger ballpark. They had to draw the Red Sox. I mean, the Father's Day crowd yesterday was 40,000 plus, and that was legitimate. People still want to go to the games. Right. They love the ballpark. They like the environment. And in fairness to the Monforts, the ticket prices have been relatively sane.
Certainly.
Through the years. They haven't been ridiculously overpriced. You can say that much for them. But you mentioned all the young players they have. They also have Chris Bryant. And Chris Bryant is the very symbol of the incompetence of the Rockies organization.
Can't undo that now.
In 2021. But they should have known this long before they signed him. But the Rockies never vet players. They just go after names that they think fans will be impressed by. Fans are far more sophisticated and knowledgeable about these things than the Rockies are, and that includes everybody who heads up decision-making in that organization, from the owner to the GM on down to the dugout. 124 OPS plus in 2021. Very good, right? Mm-hmm. His hard hit rate, though, was below average at the 42nd percentile, and that was his best mark since 2017. This is 2021. With the Rockies, this is even, well, let me back up. Before he came to the Rockies, he had knee injury problems,
right?
Shoulder injuries, back injuries, wrist injuries with the Cubs, even before he got to the Giants. And he's turning 30. And you give that guy 7 years and $182 million. With the Rockies, he's had 7 different stints on the disabled list. 31 games missed this year with a back strain. Mm-hmm. Injured his rib cage, crashing into a wall this month. Who knows when he'll be back. Mm-hmm. That's the Rockies. And that's what drives fans up the wall. But a lot of them still show up. They had good crowds for the Pittsburgh Pirates this weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a Father's Day weekend, but they had good crowds. And they go out yesterday in front of 41,000 and they throw a stink bomb out there in front of 41,000. And now they'll draw well for the Dodgers because there'll be a lot of Dodger fans in there. But it was interesting. I was talking about the Red Sox before. They outdrew the Red Sox this weekend. Probably on Friday night, at Fenway Park. The Yankees are playing the Red Sox. 75% of the crowd was Yankees fans. 75% probably. By last night, it had flipped. Well, what happened? The Yankees won big on Friday night. The Red Sox won big on Saturday and Sunday, and they got the fans back into Fenway rooting for them instead of pulling for the Yankees, and may have revived the rivalry a little bit.
It's all about just getting
it doesn't
getting
take
wins
much.
and stacking wins.
That's the point. Baseball is more popular than it's been in the last 20, 25 years right now, except for a place like this where fans are looking for any reason to go to the ballpark.
You don't need them
just
to be World
confidence.
Series
You
contenders.
don't need to win 90 games even.
Nope. It is an interesting spot. They have the 4-game set against the Dodgers starting tonight. We'll see what the Rockies do with that. And, of course, if you want to follow deeper into the Rockies as well as a lot of the other local teams, obviously we'll cover them all for you right here on Sandy and Shawn. But sometimes you want to really get your fingers in there, and Mile High Sports has you covered as well.
And we thank you for subscribing to the Sandy and Shawn podcast, listening to our show on demand whenever it fits your schedule. But we have so much apart from this program, have so much to offer. Mile High baseball fans know they get the latest on the Rockies with Drew Kreisman and the 20th and Blake podcast. Arif Dean is always on the ice for the Avalanche. Check out his podcast, Hockey Mountain High, and it's Pickaxe and Roll with the Denver Nuggets podcast. Ryan Blackburn keeping you up to date there. And on all aspects of what the Broncos are doing during this off season and in a few weeks starting training camp, go to the Broncos podcast with Troy Renk, as our friend from the Denver Post is featured on the Mile High Sports Podcast Network. All that and much, much more. Just search Mile High Sports wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, one of the major events happening this weekend, all sorts of great sports, and for my money, at least watching that final round, was the U.S. Open yesterday. And the U.S. Open is fascinating right now. In fact, all the majors are fascinating because you have sort of the weird, uncomfortable union of Live Golf and the PGA, and the players who split off, many of which said they never would, and then they did. You know, what's up, John Rahm? He missed the U.S. Open, but Bryson DeChambeau did, and he won his second U.S. Open yesterday. Started the first round, or final round, pardon me, with a 3-stroke lead over Rory McIlroy. McIlroy made it all up and was leading by a stroke on the 16th. And then everything fell to pieces.
He was leading by 2 with 5 holes to play.
Right. Everything fell apart for McIlroy, a guy who's been pretty clutch when he gets into that role. And McIlroy falters, and DeChambeau is the guy that ends up being steady Eddie and walking away with the title.
Steady Eddie, but he missed a short one too. And I don't say that in defense of McIlroy. You miss no putts all year inside of 3 feet until the 18th hole. when all you need is to sink a 2-foot, 9-inch, 10-inch putt, something like that, to get into a playoff, because he knew when he was putting that DeChambeau was in trouble off the tee.
Mm-hmm.
And
McIlroy, for the record,
even a par there was fairly miraculous. But okay, he ends up doing the miraculous, getting out of the bunker, green side at 18, which nobody from that position had done all week, getting up and down. He did it. But McIlroy makes that putt. He's in a playoff.
McIlroy had made 400.
And he's driving it better. The other guy hit 5 fairways. DeChambeau hit 5 fairways.
496 points.
71 over par.
Yeah, for McIlroy this year.
No. I'm saying the 71 for DeChambeau.
Yes, I get that.
So
I'm talking about something different.
Steady. I don't know. I challenge that a little bit.
He at least ended up not crumbling as McIlroy did. As you pointed out, 496 putts this year in this season, under 3 feet. 496 for 496 until that one.
Yeah, well, and he also missed a 4-footer, and he had been, I think, perfect all week at the U.S. Open on those greens inside of 5 feet, and then he misses 2 in the last 4 holes, and then he bogeys when he misclubbed on the 15th, I believe it was. It's a 200-yard hole. For some reason, he hit a 7-iron when everybody else is hitting 8s and 9s. DeChambeau hit a 9. I think.
Yeah.
And there's no way that McElroy, who is almost as long as DeChambeau, should have been hitting a 7 there. He hits it right through the green. And, he can't get up and down. That's a virtually impossible position to get up and down from. So, okay, that bogey is forgivable. And then on that same hole, DeChambeau 3 putts for the first time all week. He was not steady. He did not play your typical winning U.S. Open course. But what he did was very similar to what Payne Stewart, the late Payne Stewart, did in 1999.
DeChambeau's idol.
And that is, he's
25 years prior.
Idol.
At Pinehurst.
The interesting thing about that, though, is that Payne Stewart, for many, many years on the PGA Tour, was disliked intensely.
Yes.
The same way Bryson DeChambeau was until very recently disliked intensely. One of the weird things about his move to LIV is that he became a better man, and he started to pay attention to his public image, and he knew his behavior was off-putting, and other players despised him. I mean, players don't like Brooks Koepka, but they like Brooks Koepka more than they like DeChambeau for a long, long time. And DeChambeau has completely refashioned his image. It seems to be genuine. He's a LIV major winner, as Koepka was last year. I mean, LIV guys have done pretty well.
Well, they went after the best players.
Well, and the best players do well, and the players who aren't very good or are just taking the money don't make the cut in majors. John Rahm, who kind of changed horses in midstream after blasting LIV,
and things have gone south ever since.
And then that was bad karma for him. But DeChambeau, after he had won yesterday, could have been forgiven not going for the Deion Sanders approach and crowing about it maybe, but he could have stuck in a needle or two here and there. He did anything but. He talked about how fortunate he was. He talked about Rory McIlroy, who I think somewhat understandably got out of there fast and never spoke to anybody. It's a bitter loss for him. Those are putts that you and I would be ashamed to miss. And I know the pressure is there, but he didn't respond to the pressure yesterday, and that really surprised me. But DeChambeau was gracious enough to say, I was lucky, and listen, Rory McIlroy is going to win multiple majors before he's done. He's great. And I thought that from a winner, Payne Stewart was like that with Mickelson. In 1999, it was unfortunately just a few months before he passed away in a plane crash, but he showed what a class act he was right there on the 18th green in 1999. And Bryson DeChambeau did the same thing in the post-round press conference after he had won yesterday. He was all class. Nothing about his second U.S. Open, and that proves that I'm, an all-time great. And there was a little bit of that from Koepka when he was in the midst of his run of winning several majors. There was a little bit of that with Koepka. None of that with DeChambeau. He was as gracious a winner as I've seen ever. He's right up there with Nicklaus at the U.S. Open.
I was a little lucky. Golf is a game of luck. There's a lot of luck that has to happen and go your way out there. And went on to say about McIlroy, Rory is one of the best to ever play. He'll win multiple more major championships. There's no doubt that fire in him is going to continue to grow. McIlroy, for his part, said, when I finally do win this next major, it's going to be really, really sweet. I would go through 100 Sundays like this to get my hands on another major championship. But it did feel as if DeChambeau's career reinvention kind of hit its peak, because by the end, you're talking about a guy that plays a driver that was originally made for long drive contestants. It's not even for like real golf. They just go out there and slug it. But DeChambeau plays one of those drivers.
6 degrees.
The way he hits. He plays a very swashbuckling, daring type of golf that is, quite frankly, pretty entertaining to watch, because It's high risk,
It
high
is,
reward.
but he connects and tries to, but it's not phony. It's naturally his personality, and he's found a way to
he's just a
connect with
go-for-it
galleries
guy.
the way he never did before. The galleries disliked him. Remember all the Brooksy taunts, and and that was just 2 or 3 years ago when they were both on the PGA Tour. That it wasn't that long ago, and he's found a way to connect. And he has a sense of humor you never knew he had before. I mean, one of those drivable par fours over the weekend, he was, you want me to hit a driver here? He's talking to the crowd.
Right.
And then they kind of boo gently, good-naturedly boo when he doesn't take the driver out. But he scrambled, and he showed he wasn't just a bomber, not just a guy who hits at 380 yards. And he got into some trouble, especially yesterday, hitting only 5 fairways, but he got out of it every time. And yeah, he got some lucky lies, but he also got a lie on the 18th hole with a root from a tree right in front of him. He could just punch it out and punch it into the bunker. And from that spot in the bunker, no one had gotten up and down on 18 all week until he did it. He did it. Fantastic 55-yard shot out of the sand, which is all the pros say the toughest shot in golf.
It's a big win for him, and it's a big win, good, bad, or indifferent for Liv. Some of the reporting around that, people started to look at the social media side of it. And on Instagram, the PGA Tour and Liv collaborated on the Instagram posts that were happening live during the final round and collaborated on what happened. So
might bring them together.
So the imaging for the two were on the same page. And obviously this is a very complicated and uncomfortable merger that is happening in slow motion. It is.
Yeah.
And what that means we may look back and think that this US Open, where DeChambeau went from being an unlikable crank to being a respected and likable champion, maybe one of these things we look back when there is an eventual Liv and PGA Tour merger, which there will be. It's going to happen. We may look and say this was maybe the moment where the momentum finally became impossible to turn back.
And my point is DeChambeau, and I think you'd agree, DeChambeau helped with that.
Yes.
He could have been,
if he was the grump that he was when he won 4 years ago,
even just a few remarks yesterday
could have said
reminding people that, hey, LIV is an exhibition golf, and I've called it exhibition golf.
54 hole tournaments.
Look at me.
Yeah.
I was pretty good today. I was as good as I had to be today. And they said, well, you can't play past 54 holes on the lip. He did none of that. He was gracious toward the guy who at various times has been the biggest critic of Liv, that being Rory McIlroy. And it went in exactly the opposite direction and praised McIlroy to the hilt, and probably has spared McIlroy
I think so.
a certain amount of questioning here, and allowed McIlroy to come back today and say what you just quoted him as having said.
Yeah, it will be an interesting rest of the year for golf for sure as we see how this moves along. And there's been a lot of things going on this weekend. Obviously, tonight we have the big NBA Finals game. The Celtics take on the Mavericks in Boston. That is Game 5. The Celtics have a chance to close it out. We'll talk about that tomorrow as well. If you want to hear more about the Broncos, by the way, you can catch Colorado Sports Night. We have our friends Arn Anderson and Mick Miller, Taylor Kilgore join us pretty regularly. I'll be on that tonight talking about the Denver Broncos for minicamp, so go check that out at KWGN Channel 2 this evening. Thanks so much to Marty Richardson of Dawg Nation, the founder of Dawg Nation Hockey, and to Milan Hejduk, Avalanche legend, for joining us today in studio to talk about the terrific Dog Bowl 14 event that they will have over the course of the week. We'll check in with that as the week goes along too. So it's great to talk to them about it. It's great to talk to you about it. You're the one that makes the show work. Danny Bailey is the man in the booth, directing all of it, including all the switch out with guests. All that is Danny. Sandy and I just kind of sit here and try to make things go as we do. So none of it happens without Danny, and none of it happens without you watching. If you're watching and you enjoyed what you watched, that little subscribe button, you see it down there. It's red. You can say click it, subscribe. We'll let you know that every time we're coming on, so you can catch this live every weekday. We will be back at it tomorrow. He's Sandy Clough. I'm Shawn Drotar, and this is Mile High Sports.